Again, I'm Ruskin Mark filling in for Natasha this evening. And let me again welcome Shabakan Kambon, Reverend Kwame Kamau, Bongo Grease, Bongo Wisely, and Nicole Buffon.
Yes, good night, Ruskin. How are you? And a special good night to our listeners here on 91.1, and of course, those joining us on YouTube and Facebook. This is the Indaba program, the place where knowledge grows. This is the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee, the voice of the people. And I'm happy here tonight that I'm alongside my co-host, Reverend Kwame Kamau. And of course, tonight we're going to be looking at the question of cannabis. Cannabis has been decriminalized in Trinidad and Tobago. What does it mean for us? What does it mean? What do these developments mean for people across the Caribbean? And of course, we have a special guest tonight from the United States of America who's going to tell us what's happening there on the cutting edge. So, Kwame, introduce our guest and get us going tonight.
Oh, sure, no problem. And again, a very pleasant good night to the 91.1 FM Talk City family, to our Facebook family joining us live, and our YouTube family. It's always a pleasure to be here every Wednesday evening from 8 p.m. to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I want to say a special welcome as well to the African continent. We have persons in Guinea-Bissau tuning in on tonight, Uganda tuning in on tonight, Ghana, Nigeria, as far south as South Africa. We seem to be growing by leaps and bounds, and we are thankful to you, our faithful Indaba audience. Well, as per our usual, we have quite an episode carded for you on tonight. It seems as if, Brother Shabaka, that the number 23 definitely continues to have special meaning. It is definitely a number that speaks to the clearing of the pathway. It speaks to new beginnings. It speaks to diplomacy. It speaks to growth and increase. And it seems tonight that there are a number of things that coincide with the number 23. It was on the 23rd, as it were, of December in 2019 that cannabis was decriminalized in Trinidad and Tobago. And as fate would have it, FATE, one of our guests on tonight was born on the 23rd of July. That is Bongo Grease, the acting chair of the All Mansions of Rastafari. Very much responsible. At the vanguard of the cannabis decriminalization movement was the All Mansions of Rastafari, is the All Mansions of Rastafari in terms of the continued struggle and fight beyond the decriminalization process. And we're going to be hearing from him on tonight. Also, by way of the 23rd.
Before we move on, my brother,
Sure.
we should tell our audience about the All Mansions of Rastafari, because this is a body that was pulled together out of the pieces of the Rastafarian movement to advance that group, to advance the interest of that community, led by Brother Trini Levi. And I think it's something that's quite special that we shouldn't skip over, an attempt to build that unity that would be necessary for that community that has been so persecuted historically across the Caribbean.
Well, thank you for that. And certainly the All Mansions of Rastafari continues to stand as, again, a beacon and a vanguard of consciousness within the Rastafari community. As the name suggests, is the All Mansion. So a mansion within the Rastafari community is akin to a denomination within the Christian fraternity. And so all of the various denominations, mansions of Rastafari, you're talking about the Nyabingi order, you're talking about the Bobo Ashanti community, you're talking about the 12 tribes of Israel, a Black unity, among a number of others, came together under one powerful, mighty banner. And yes, it was founded by Ras Trini Levi, joining us, I'm sure, in Ethiopia. So a special good evening to Ras Trini Levi himself. And so the chairmanship, so to speak, has now been passed on to Bongo Grease, and he's joining us live on tonight. And we are so very fortunate to have him. Further up the Caribbean, we have the Caribbean Rastafari organization. And so, as the All Mansions of Rastafari is to Trinidad and Tobago, so too is Crow to the Caribbean region. The Caribbean Rastafari organization, as chaired now by Bongo Wisely Tafari, is that premier body that represents Rastafari issues at the level of CARICOM, at the level of the various state apparatus, at the various regional and international multilateral agencies. And so the CRO, the Caribbean Rastafari organization, are quite a powerhouse. And tonight we have no less a person than the chair of the CRO with us again, Bongo Wisely Tafari. Last but not least, we have the National Program Director of the Minorities for Medical Marijuana in the United States of America. And she's also a fellow board director alongside myself and many others, our resident cannabis expert in Dr. Rachel Knox. We are all part of an organization called the Association of Cannabis Health, Equity and Medicine. This organization is the premier, as it were, organization in the United States of America that leads the charge as it relates to the 4 pillars of health equity: environmental, economic, social, and human equity. And they do so utilizing cannabis as the medium. Of course, we've heard most recently that there's a buzz, there's a stir. Some persons believe that decriminalization was a mistake, a faux pas, and something that we should walk back as a community. Certainly, there are those voices that try to echo that. But on tonight, we'll be hearing from those voices who are the proponents, who are staunch, as it were, supporters of cannabis, of course, with a lot of fantastic reason. So the question tonight is, having decriminalized the cannabis on the 23rd of December 2019, what's next? What should be the next steps? What's in store for us on the national level? What's available to us on a regional level? And absolutely what's going on as it were, the level of the CARICOM as we continue to make strides with regards to this issue. I want to turn, of course, locally to Ras Bongo Greece, acting chair of the All Mansions of Rastafari. A very pleasant good evening to I. Welcome to the Indaba Reasoning, the place where knowledge grows, the voice of the Emancipation Support Committee, and the voice of the people. Tell us, what was the road, first of all, to decriminalization like? Because for many persons, they just woke up one morning and cannabis was decriminalized. And that certainly is not the historic reality of what took place. Can you very briefly but powerfully share the Rastafari involvement, the All Mansions of Rastafari involvement in particular, as it relates to the decriminalization of cannabis in Trinidad and Tobago? Welcome, Bongo Greece.
Greetings, everyone, blessed love, highly I, Selassie I, and Empress Men and I love, The All Mansions of Rastafari in Trinidad and Tobago played a very, very important part in the decriminalization of the cannabis, since it is the All Mansions of Rastafari that had many rallies, many seminars, many training programs, many advocacy, with the government, in rallying for the decriminalization of the herb, since so many brothers had suffered. Imagine brothers with locks touching the ground, lost the locks for 5 piece, a 10 piece, it was, the burden on Rastafari had been so terrible in terms of, the herb, and the herb has always been sacred to the Rastafari movement. It has also the purpose of the decriminalization. So many youths were persecuted for a little smoke, causing their whole life to be in a shamble. They cannot get work, they cannot go to school, things that they would like to do cannot. And it is the All Mansions of Rastafari in Trinidad and Tobago that had played a significant part, in terms of drafting proposal, working with lawyers from Jamaica, working with other experts in terms of, cannabis advocacy, and produced them to the Attorney General, the then Attorney General at that time, and so certain things were taken into consideration. And today we see the ease of sentencing as where the criminalization is concerned. However, there's very much more has to be done in terms of, because people are still getting locked up for weed. You plant 4 trees, you still cannot do anything about it. So I think that the point where we are at right now is a standstill, and the government at this point in time is getting people to be comfortable with just growing 4 trees, just growing 4 trees and taking a chance of having those 4 trees and cannot produce anything out of it. So we are at a point here now where the coming together of not only Trinidad and Tobago, but the whole CARICOM basin, in coming to certain initiatives as to where the criminalization is concerned, in advancing our purpose and intentions for the herb at this point in time is much necessary. I would also like, before I close, to mention that it is so fortunate that on the 15th of this month, which is Friday, there is a big conference in Colombia taking place where CARICOM representatives will be there to discuss the certain initiatives pertaining to the cannabis. However, at this point, All Mansions of Rastafari does not have a representative in it, which is so sad. And there's much to be done, because based on these discussions, we cannot be laid back. Highly high.
Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Hopefully, we put a plug out on tonight. If there's a sponsor that wants to get behind the Old Mansions of Rastafari to send a delegate or two to this very important conference taking place in Colombia as they revisit the war on drugs, because we know historically the war on drugs has really been a war on people. And if we are to be honest, and we have the Attorney General's statistics to prove it, that the war on drugs in Trinidad and Tobago really targeted the Afro-Trinidadian community. And within that community, the Rastafari community certainly bore the greatest brunt of that, where criminalization was concerned, convictions were concerned. He spoke about losing their locks, losing their freedom, losing their livelihood, being separated from families, entire communities destroyed on the Randolph boroughs. They were even alleged, and I use the word alleged, assassinations, extrajudicial killings as it relates to the issue. I want to bring Bongo Wisely Tafari into the reasoning on tonight. Greetings, Bongo Wisely. At the CARICOM level, there was a commission that was undertaken under the auspices of Madam Justice Rosemary Bell and Twine and several commissioners at the time to study cannabis, to study marijuana and the effects of it, and whether or not decriminalization and legalization was the way to go. Coming out of that study, we know that they did give the green light, and it was advised that owing to the fact that there are a number of medical, industrial, sacramental, personal, and other benefits to be derived, the pros far outweigh the cons. Talk to us about the Rastafari presence at the level of CARICOM. Walk us through the various islands in terms of those who have decriminalized, those who have legalized. Talk to us about some best practices that are happening in the region, because Trinidad finds itself in a place where we can grow 4 trees, where we can have 30 grams of cannabis, 5 grams of resin, and we can utilize cannabis in our homes for personal use. But that's as far as we have gone. Talk to us about what's happening up the islands with regards to other jurisdictions and how they are treating with cannabis there. Welcome again to Indaba, Bongo Wisely.
Yes, greetings once again. It's a pleasure, to be on Indaba at this moment. I greet the item in the name of His Divine Majesty, Kadamawi, Haile Selassie, and his beloved Empress Menen. Blessed love, family. Big thanks,
Heart of love.
Rastafari. Yes, well, it's a long journey, Yeah, man. Well, within the whole situation presently as it is, the CARICOM, that report by Professor Antoine Bell Antoine, she went around all the different islands, interviewing people, getting their perspective as to the whole situation pertaining to the cannabis plant and even the cannabis industry, because at the time it was a so-called illegal industry that was going on,
The
and
legacy market.
it is known, that market was able to finance the economy of some certain countries in the region, So the report was convened and came out with its findings. The report really recommended that the region should legalize the cannabis plant with regulations. Legalize with regulations, But then what we see happening in all of the islands is just a decriminalization, of they decriminalize 40 grams in certain countries, and they allow you to grow 4 plants or 5 plants, different countries varies, so that in itself, I mean, that's a joke. If the whole initiative is to bring cannabis reform, because we all know initially why the plant was criminalized is because of racist undertones. There was nothing scientific, or
Brother
there was
Rice,
nothing, on that level.
Brother Rice, help us
Yes,
help us break down for the sake of our listeners. What are some of the challenges that people are facing with the way? Because I know there was this celebration when there was decriminalization. There was a feeling that this was a step forward, but soon after that, those who were involved in the industry started to feel that this did not go far enough, nowhere near what they expected. So help us understand the challenges and the suffering that people are still enduring with decriminalization. Some of the challenges that people are having. The report that you're
right.
getting.
Well, see, with the decriminalization makes no room for an industry, because 5 plants,
Yes.
40 grams, that's
So
what happens.
you have people now who cannot make a living, cannot use the industry. They can't go into the industry to make a living from what they've been doing in the past, as they've been doing in the past.
Right. Well, some of the governments are saying, well, that's just the first step. You see? Like, well, in St. Vincent, in Antigua and Barbuda, they are way much ahead of St. Lucia, for example. In St. Vincent, there is a medicinal industry in operations. In Antigua, the same way there is an industry which has started, in which there is an organized group of Rastafari brethren together with the state. The state has an NGO or whatever we call it, and together with some foreign investor, the 3 of them come together and they have that industry going on, at this point in time.
Let me just bring Bongo Greece into the conversation for a minute, because in Trinidad they gave us the opportunity to apply for licenses. Has that worked out in such a way that the Rastafarian community could benefit and become involved in the industry, or is it set up in such a way that it privileges certain classes and groups in the society?
Yeah, well, at this point in time, there is no benefit in it for the Rastafari movement, because since from the government handling of these licenses, nothing has been happening. Imagine if you start from the University of the West Indies in Trinidad and Tobago that's supposed to have a research and development license. They don't have that. There's no research of cannabis at the university. Plus, there's no programs set up at all in Trinidad and Tobago where youths can learn how to utilize the plant in terms of the downstream. absolutely none. So what you are having now is that in order to survive at present, you have to have some sort of capital where you can actually go to a private lab and do your private testing and these things in order for preparation for whensoever that the license come. Other than that, at present, there's nowhere in terms of scientific research where people can understand the proper ratio, in terms of how they prepare certain products, medicinal products, creams, whatever. And there are so many great opportunities downstream, that people is just right now into a deep hole, a quandary, rather than properly utilizing the skill in Trinidad and Tobago as where cannabis is concerned.
Yeah, perhaps now is a good time for us to bring Nicole into the conversation.
Absolutely.
Because Nick, you're seeing what's happening here, and how do you feel about what you're hearing coming out of the Caribbean? Are the opportunities lost? I mean, you could imagine people who would have celebrated decriminalization, hoping to get licenses to build businesses. Those who suffered for such a long time, and now years of waiting without any movement forward. You see our predicament. Tell us your feelings and what you think we could do to move ourselves, advance the process here in the Caribbean.
Oh, this is a loaded question. Well, thank you for having me on this evening. It's an honor to be sharing on this platform with so many others that have been doing the work on the ground there in the Caribbean. So thank you for having me. One of the first things that I heard Bongo Wisely mention SVG and Antigua and Barbuda and what they're doing there. The government of Trinidad has missed an opportunity. They decriminalized, and I guess they were hoping the path which was going to be a path to legalization, but not including the Rastafari community in those conversations is a missed opportunity for the country, because they have been the keepers of the genetics for decades. They know how the plant works. They know how to utilize it. And what is important to understand, and I've visited Trinidad since 2019, and I understand that a lot of the young people there are consuming cannabis that's coming right here from the United States, and unfortunately not embracing the landrace genetics that are growing right there in Trinidad. But that is truly what the most valuable genetic that the island has. It's not just growing genetics that are coming from the United States or coming from outside of the country. It's growing the genetics that are from and indigenous to that land, which the Rastafari community have been keeping sacred and have kept alive for almost 100 years now. And so it's unfortunate that they missed that opportunity. And we're knocking on almost 10 years later, and it seems like the decriminalization didn't work. Unfortunately, it's not going to if you're still criminalizing amounts. It should be a pathway for our Rastafari community to be able to enter into this cannabis space, and that is through their skill and knowledge about this plant. They should be right there at the table, having conversations with the government and with regulators on how to best grow the crop that is indigenous to that land, grow the genetics that are indigenous to that land, and not burn fields, not burn land, the crop growing outdoors that is so natural. They should be embracing it and bringing it in. And absolutely, I didn't know or realize that along with decriminalization, they didn't actually create some sort of research program at the university, because that would help. If they had some sort of way to start doing the research on the genetics that are right there in your country, because they are the most value that you could bring out of Trinidad is what is indigenous to that land. That's my kind of 2 cents on that. I fear that the path to legalization for the country is not going to be clean. It's not going to be fair if the pricing for licensing is out of reach to the average individual that is used to using and consuming and growing this plant. And that's an issue. There have been other countries like he mentioned, SVG and Antigua and Barbuda, that made sure that they had Rastafari tribes locally in those conversations. And I fear that it's going to be lost. I fear that the tribal communities on the island that have been keeping these genetics that if they are not part of the conversation, then the country itself is going to lose its most valuable crop, and
Yeah.
that is the
Yeah,
genetic.
Nick, let me just add to this this conversation just briefly on that note, in that we have persecuted this community, not just during the colonial period, but in the post-colonial period. Independent Caribbean countries have persecuted Rastafarians, and perhaps if we were to look in a just manner at that history, we would see that perhaps they deserve some form of reparation, and certainly setting up an industry that is outside of their reach in terms of capital would be a further persecution to the community, something that we would not want on our conscience. Kwame, come in here and tell me, this is not the kind of blood that we want on our hands in the 21st century, is it?
Absolutely not. And I want to shout out right away Prophet Jamiki Bo out of the Bahamas. He's tuned in via Facebook, and he's making mention of something. I want to quote him verbatim. Greetings from the Bahamas as we fight the injustice here, as we still agitate for our cannabis rights. But decriminalization is a bad move. It must be full legalization. We absolutely hear you. And to the point that you're speaking to, Brother Shabaka, activist extraordinaire, yes, reparations is absolutely part of the cannabis truvisation, part of the cannabis reasoning. And one of the things that all mansions of Rastafari has been agitating for is a 10-point reparations plan that does allow for education, for land grants, does allow for science and technology transfer, does allow for research, does allow for the missed opportunities to be given to the community by way of waiving of fees associated with certain things. For instance, to be honest, we've been talking about the fact that legalization and the pathway to legalization has not yet actualized in Trinidad, and it's so true. But there is legislation on the books that allow for the legalization process. The problem is that there's an apparatus in the Cannabis Control Authority, which is given the mandate, the remit, as it were, to guide, to direct, to roll out, to administrate this affair by way of setting up a board of directors, by way of setting up an entire commission, an authority to set up the fee structures, set up all the various regulations, and all of the regulations that we have seen so far. I use the word so far. They are in the hundreds of thousands in terms of licenses. You are talking about security apparatus, where you have to have fenced and or walled properties with regards to the acreage of cannabis that you are going to grow or that you're going to process, etc., etc. In addition to that, you have to have track and trace technologies and a number of those things. So unless you have that partnership between the Rastafari community and the other legacy market experts and those with the finance abroad and the technology, sometimes and in some instances the greenhouse and other quarantined environments, then we are not going to see the kind of reparations that this opportunity affords Rastafari. And so I definitely want to stand in solidarity with Bahamas because they are joining the Caribbean with regards to the process. I want to ask Nicole something, though, in the limited time that we have, because we are down to closing remarks now. Expungement of records is something in Trinidad and Tobago that our legislation allows for. Unfortunately, it's not automatic, and you have to do so by way of applying for it. And most persons don't have the bandwidth and the ability to apply for it themselves. They don't have the legal training and know how to navigate, in quotes, Babylon's system. Talk to me about in our closing remarks, about the process of expungement and how important that is for persons who have been criminalized, hurt, harmed historically, targeted historically. How important is expungement to that community? And then I also want, is a double question, how does science and technology fit in? I know that you are on the cutting edge in terms of some things coming out the gate. I'm not sure what you can talk about tonight. Super excited about it. Not sure what you can whisper and whistle in our ears, but talk about expungement on the one hand and talk about the role that science and technology can play to take cannabis into the 21st century.
Thank you for that, Reverend. Well, of course, expungement, getting people's records clear, like Bongo Grease mentioned earlier, the youth that get arrested, they can't go to school, they can't get a job. That affects a whole family, it affects a whole community. And of course, it keeps pushing them back to the legacy market, to the illicit market, if they aren't able to participate in a legal way. And so it's vitally important to be able to restore people's justice, to be able to give them their lives back. I heard that there's a challenge in Trinidad with trying to find these police records. Some of them might be gone or disappeared and so on and so forth. And that has also been a challenge, not only cost, but resources, but also just making sure that your record doesn't exist somewhere and it's being held up and you can't find the physical paper. So of course, getting people's records expunged is vitally important so that they can get their lives back. But what is even more, I mentioned earlier about land race and what is native to the island of Trinidad and Tobago and how valuable those genetics are to the growth of the cannabis industry on the island. Trinidad and any other island should just be focusing on their land race varietals that are high THC. And so a new company that I'm going to be working with is utilizing genetics that they've collected over the past few decades and being able to test land, test whatever genetics are there now in a land, in a country, on an island, and say, okay, we can find the father, the mother of these plants, and let's bring that original land race back to this country, back to this land, because that medicine that will grow on that land will be able to heal and all the conditions that the people on that land are suffering from. And so it's exciting times as we embark on a new time in technology when it comes to using cannabis and understanding how the plant works and being able to create true medicine from it. I will be the first HIV patient using this technology to help patients realize the benefits of using plants as medicine. I'm not talking about something that I'll be utilizing that'll get me high. It will be something that will have high antiviral properties, high anti-inflammatory properties, and utilizing those compounds from the plant that do that in the body, that do that in any vertebrate animal's body. So really excited about where we're going in the future of it. But obviously, I value the input that the Rastafari community has brought to us still having this plant around almost 100 years later after they tried to wipe it off the face of the earth. And so I know how important it is to make sure that those communities really have access to being able to be a part of this billion-dollar legal global industry.
Yeah, Nicole, I'm sorry, but we're not going to brush across what you just said there. We have to go back over that a second. You're saying that you are someone who's going to be the first to experiment with medical marijuana to treat HIV. Is that correct?
Yes, to treat HIV and
kidney disease. And what? Kidney disease?
Correct, yes.
And so you're working with a particular medical facility on this project?
Yes, I am. So it's a platform, it's technology that combines thousands and thousands of white papers and research papers that's been done over the last 30 years on cannabis, along with COAs. In our industry, that is known as a certificate of analysis. That's what you get from the laboratory that determines what cannabinoid profile is in the plant, what terpene profile is in the plant, making sure there's no bacteria, mold, etc. So those COAs are combined with the research papers, and we're using AI technology. We've input about 30 conditions into the platform. And so you'll be able to go to your dispensary, you'll be able to go to your local grower, and you'll say, look, these genetics is what helps with my condition. Can you grow me a plant that results in these genetics? And then being able to create a customized blend for that individual, for that patient. So I will be utilizing this platform and being the first HIV patient using it to create a custom blend for myself. Yes.
Brilliant.
Okay, well, we definitely, I'm sure Bongo Grease, is that something that you're looking forward to, the expansion of that type of technology? Is it something you also believe in? You believe that that technology will work? Yeah,
I believe in it. I firmly believe in it because she made a great contribution there. Because the countries itself need to find their original genetic breed. Why this genetic breed is so important is because finding your own genetic breed, like the landrace Rastafari use, the sativa, and understanding your own landrace. What has happened is that it makes a much better medicine in terms of building one stem cell and everything for your environment. So, for instance, if in Trinidad and Tobago we can find our landrace that the Rastafari movement had here 30, 40, 50 years ago, and utilize that particular landrace, that specific landrace in terms of making a medicine for persons, I think it would work much better rather than the importation of weed. Because take for instance, the plant that you grow in your yard is more susceptible and much more better for you to use. You know, it acclimatizes with you than any other herb that you could buy outside the box. So she made a very strong point in terms of that land race in formulating a medicine for the persons in the country, even like diabetes and all these other different medicine. Understanding the proper genetic definitely is going to help.
And Bongo Wisely, you're listening to this conversation now. You concur with Brother Bongo Grease and Sister Bufong on this, the potential of marijuana in terms of its medicinal use. This seems to be a new level of I think. Do you also believe that this is the future?
Yeah, man, definitely I concur. Because research and science had been blocked, on that plant for years, and now that research, it's being liberated. We are coming to realize all the value, the potential of that plant. So as more research is being done, more information will come forward on the value and importance of the plant.
Yeah, and,
So
Nicole looks confident. She looks like she's absolutely certain that this is the way to
very
go.
much impressed with what she has said. Yeah, man, and the work they are doing. Very much, because these are the things, the Caribbean government supposed to be looking into.
That's right.
Because from the Caribbean Rastafari organization's perspective, we've made recommendations that the Caribbean should be considered as a cannabis zone. And where certain countries, probably like Guyana, and then they could concentrate on the industrial or the low THC production, and the islands, the volcanic regions, islands, can go into the real THC, the therapeutic cannabis, and then make that exclusive for the region. But
Not
then
just
our
for the
leaders
world.
are so divided.
For the world, Bongo, for the world. Like
Exactly.
this is not like
The world would come to us. The world would come to us.
Absolutely, it absolutely would. If you
Yeah,
focus
yeah.
on what you all grow best, if you focus on what is, and this platform will also be able to present. You'll be able to use this platform and all of its data that we collect over the next few years to be able to present to governments and say, look, we don't even have to guess. This is what will grow best here, and this is what is needed all over the world. So let's make this part of our GDP.
Yeah. So,
Absolutely.
Nicole, what would you say to someone who is skeptical at this point in time of the research that you are alluding to, of the research that you are about to embark on? What would you say to them to convince them that this is something that is absolutely worthy? And I want to let everybody wade in on that before we close. I think that's a good point. Kwame, is there anything else you think we need to add there?
It's definitely a good start. It's definitely a good start.
Okay, so
They're
Nicole, tell us what
what
would you say to the skeptics?
Oh, I say to the skeptics, I can just give them a list of name and patients already that have used this plant to heal their bodies. They just didn't
Yeah, but
have.
we're talking about other things. I mean, the science has established that it's good for people with a number of things. There were a number of programs on
Absolutely.
TV over the last few years that have
Yes.
shown how cannabis works with people with epileptic seizures and all kinds of
All
other
kinds of
issues.
things.
But
Yes.
now we're talking HIV/AIDS.
Yes, HIV/AIDS. Do you know why this plant was even that the beginning of Probably not. So let me just remind your audience, in the United States, the reason that we have medical cannabis and the movement to start legalizing cannabis started was because advocates in California were making brownies and growing plants to give to patients during the AIDS epidemic. It is what kept people alive as long as they were staying alive, was cannabis. And it's the reason that we have cannabis legalized in the United States today. It was because of the HIV and AIDS epidemic that swept through the United States in the early 80s. And so from that, we know how cannabis helps with HIV and AIDS. There's been several research papers already done on it. I will just be the first patient using this formula strictly from strictly from cannabis. There's already
You're the first person who's going to use the AI technology to develop a specific blend for your body.
That is correct. Yes.
I understand.
Yes, that is
Okay.
correct.
I get it.
And then I will have, they will be able to create a genome from that for me. It'll be called Purple Plant Magic. Nobody can trademark that, and it will be able to be used in its best form, which is raw form, tincture form, cold press form, to then be able to create the medicine that other patients suffering from the same conditions as me will be able to also use.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Very interesting.
But there's something I wanted to underscore, and it seems to me, I don't know what our technical staff and or producers would say. They'd give the thumbs up. But been having such a powerful program thus far. I really want to sail all the way to the top of the hour on this matter. There's so much to talk about. There's so much to explore. Perhaps the other topic that we had envisaged to be included on the latter part, maybe we can do that next week. I'm looking forward to our producers and our technical staff giving us a thumbs up. But one of the things that I was advocating for was that of the Rastafari, as it were, involvement at the level of the board of directors of the Cannabis Control Authority in Trinidad and Tobago. I was actually quoted in the Newsday as having made that point during a celebration rally that we had when we talked about the next steps in terms of decriminalization. Now what? Because one of the problems that we have is that they don't want persons who are involved in the industry in an active way to be participating in the board. And I think that that's going to be a missed opportunity. It is those persons who have the experience and the expertise with the landrace genetics, certainly with the therapeutics, certainly operating within the margins of the legacy market. Those individuals absolutely will bring the best ideas and expertise to the board. Otherwise, have a lawyer, a doctor, a dentist, an accountant, but if they don't understand cannabis in the way that Rastafari understands cannabis, then the board will be missing something. So we are hoping that they're listening on tonight, and we are hoping that they will include all mansions of Rastafari and other organizations like that at the level of the board, whether or not they are involved in cannabis production from a sacramental perspective or otherwise. That should not be an automatic disqualification. If anything, it should qualify you.
Yeah, Kwame, what I'd like to say is that we have a tradition here in Trinidad and Tobago and across the Caribbean coming out of the colonial experience of limiting the legitimate political actors, excluding certain people from the realm of participation. And certainly, again, the Rastafarians in particular have been, due to the kinds of persecutions, they have been rendered as non-legitimate political actors traditionally. And so this would be a continuation of that. And of course, they're not the only ones who are the victims of this. It is a way that the colonial entities establish the legitimate political actors in a very narrow framework. Something we have to challenge. It's not something you could just write about. You have to literally set up campaigns to challenge that and to seek to ensure that this process is as democratic as possible moving forward. Otherwise, the issues that Bongo Greece and Bongo Wisely have raised already will continue to plague us into the foreseeable future.
Absolutely. Bongo Grease, to you. Closing remarks as it relates to, and listen to the question carefully, as it relates to next steps. Cannabis has been decriminalized in Trinidad and Tobago. Now what? What would be your suggested? Give me 2 points to close. What are two things that we should do? And I'm going to bring it all the way around. I'll talk to Bongo Wisely. We'll ask the Purple
Um,
Princess herself. Talk to us about two things that we should do in terms of our next steps.
One, proper research and development. Two, having the Rastafari on the board so as to maintain the proper genetics of the cannabis sativa in the country, since they need to understand with cannabis there's cross-pollination, and because of cross-pollination, you know, in maintaining your proper, your legitimate herb, you know, you has to have the people who are in the, who has the experience over the years in the industry to produce such, you know. So involvement in the Rastafari, the all mansions of Rastafari, in seeking Rastafari and geographical spots in Trinidad and Tobago where the real genetic sativa is at this point in time is very important for the advancement of any medicinal properties in Trinidad and Tobago.
Wonderful research and the inclusion of Rastafari, the legacy market, the ones who kept the plant genetics going, involved in the decision-making process at the highest levels. Bongo Wisely Tafari, talk to me at the Caribbean level. You spoke about a Caribbean zone. Decriminalization, now what? What are the next steps for the Caribbean in terms of really extracting the best benefit out of cannabis that is possible?
Yes, well, as they say, the next step is legalization. You know, because if any industry is to be established to bring benefits to the population, is an industry have to be in operation. You know, and with the decriminalized status we have there, there's no room for industry. So in terms of the next step for the policy makers is to move towards the legalization of the plant and see to it that the process for the industry is set up in place. And that would call for a serious education program also.
And Bongo Wisely, for the benefit of our listeners, what is the benefit of us getting involved in it at the industry level? What does that mean? What could that mean for the people in the community who have been marginalized, who've been persecuted, who have been left out in the past of the economy? What could that mean? Try to bring it home, because people don't understand. When we talk these things, sometimes it goes over people's heads. So bring it down to what it would mean for the people.
You're right. Because when most of the time then when people speak of legalization or even decriminalization of cannabis, people only think of, well, burn a spliff and you want to smoke, you want some weed to smoke, and them kind of thing there. But as we're speaking of an industry, because the cannabis plant in itself, as I said, research is now unfolding, the value of the cannabis plant in terms of not just only for medicinal, nutritional values, therapeutical values, spiritual values, industrial values, and the list goes on. So in terms of the plant itself.
We're talking about a vast industry and people in the community that have a comparative advantage of growing and maintaining these products, who are not being given the opportunity to be able to participate and benefit for the benefit of us all. And I think that's the point. Because if our Rastafarian community in the Caribbean were to get a foothold in the industry and they were to develop, we would all benefit from such a development. And I think we need to make that point very, very clear. It does not benefit.
That's where education comes in.
Yeah,
a
it does not
serious
tend
You
to
are
be
championing,
such a
if,
large
if I'm hearing you
segment
correctly,
of our
you are
community.
championing education, you are championing legalization, and as a result of the education and legalization, industrialization, and you are asking for a Caribbean economic zone and legislative zone, whereby we have what we would call parallel legislation across the board in the Caribbean. One of the things that persons have been advocating for, and please inform me in terms of whether or not you agree with this, Bongo Wisely, they are saying Trinidad and Tobago is a tiny, itsy bitsy, teeny weeny a jurisdiction. I'm using all the superlatives to say small. And St. Vincent the Grenadines worse. And Antigua and Barbuda even worse. These tiny jurisdictions having, as it were, separate laws as it relates to cannabis. Medicinal is legal here, it's illegal there. Sacramental is legal here, but it's not legal there. Persons navigating the Caribbean may find that the 5-piece legal in one territory can get you locked up in another one for 10 years. Do you see the need for the Caribbean region based on the education you're talking about, the legalization that you're talking about, and the industrialization that you're talking about? Do you see the need for us as a Caribbean region to have one singular, as it were, legislation that speaks to all of our jurisdictions as it relates to cannabis as the proverbial icing on the cake? And I think a Rastaman wouldn't want icing on his cake or his banana bread. He might want a honey glaze on top of it, because and I already deal with icing too much. So talk to me about that whole process. The
Well, for
Caribbean.
me, we don't have the time to go into the details, but I think the point is clear that it would be best to have model legislation developed here in the region for the region,
Of course,
then
harmonization of
across
the
the board.
legislation.
Yeah, man. So
Yeah.
in the time we have left, let's bring Nicole in. Nicole, first of all, we just want to thank you for being open enough to share with us today on this program your own personal details. We want to say, I could say on behalf of everybody else on this program, including my brother Kwame Kamau, that we are in solidarity with you. We want to wish you all the best as you fight with the challenges that you have in front of you, and and we admire your optimism, and you seem to be approaching it in the right way. But we want to give you the closing remarks tonight on Indaba.
Well, thank you so much. Again, thank you for having me. And I think I would just say the two things that I would tell to the Trinidad government is one, to preserve your land race genetics. That's the first thing you need to do. Stop burning fields, start cutting down the plants that are growing outdoors that these Rastas have been growing for decades. You need to preserve them. That's your first step, because that is the most valuable crop of cannabis that you could bring out of the country. And then to remind them, and along with what Bongo Wisely was saying, really the Caribbean does not have the land mass to focus on industrial cannabis and focus on industrial hemp. It requires a lot of land, and it requires a lot of very expensive equipment and buildings that you would have to put on the land to process the hemp in order to make it an industrial product. And so focusing on just the medicine, focusing on those land race genetics, whatever they may be, getting them tested, getting them through the proper research, partnering with your universities, partnering with education and patients to bring out the best research around your plant. Because your genetics that are growing in Trinidad, you take those same genetics and put them in St. Vincent or put them in Jamaica, they're not going to be the same plant. So focusing on what you can grow with your sun and your sand and your soil and your expertise from your own Rastafarian tribes is going to be your most valuable crop when it comes to cannabis. And so just reminding them of that, and not really focusing on the industrial jobs that you'll be able to provide. I think there should be free trade between Africa and the Caribbean providing the medicine and Africa providing the hemp that it needs to the rest of the world. But focusing on the ancillary side of the industry, focusing on those businesses and suppliers that will be able to support the cannabis industry once you bring in that medical side of it, from laboratories to nutrients for your plants to all of the things that go around to support the cannabis industry. Those are the jobs that you really need to be focusing on, knowing that your medical industry is going to be so valuable to the country. And that's my 2 cents.
Thank you for providing us with those nuances, Nicole. And I think, Kwame, over to you to close tonight. We want to thank Sister Zakia, our chair, for giving us the opportunity to go through this for the entire program, to give the program over to this valuable conversation. Kwame, you close tonight, brother.
Absolutely. I'd close as I ended, sorry, as I began, with regards to the point that was made from the onset, which is there's a need for education, but the type of education that is required is specialized. There are specialist fields within the area of cannabis, and within the area of cannabis sacrament, I want to say to those who are within the conservative field of religion, and I know for from my expertise, from my experience as a diplomat within the field, as a reparations activist within the field, that there has been a lot of pushback from within the conservative religious community. I want to say to that community that there's ample evidence available to us to absolutely allow for cannabis to rise as the shining star that it always was, that it is and will always be in terms of medicine, in terms of industry, in terms of the opportunity for us to grow in our sacramental knowledge. And yes, absolutely, from an environmental perspective, we can absolutely save the planet utilizing this herb. We need to get together. We need to
All right.
stop speaking at each other, but speak with each other so that we can take cannabis across the board. And with those few words, I want to thank everyone for coming out on tonight. And let's continue to partner together, because it's going to take the All Mansions. It is going to take Crow. It's going to take Purple Magic. It's going to take ACAM. And it's absolutely going to take leading cutting edge activists like Brother Shabaka and the Emancipation Support Committee to take cannabis to where it needs to be, because it takes absolutely a village to raise a child. In this case, it takes a village to raise a plant.
Thank you, Kwame. Thank you, Brother Wisely. Thank you, Nicole. And thank you, dear Bongo Greece. Good night. And please join us again next week, Wednesday, for another edition of Indaba. Good night.